All right, Chris, we're back talking about The Boys season 2 finale. Dude, is it safe for me to say that a lot has happened in the last 5 weeks?
5 weeks.
It's been 5 weeks since the show came out, because remember, the first 3 episodes aired all together.
Well, let's see. There was a fly on Mike Pence's head. Hubie Halloween came out and surprised the world.
Dude, you're only listing off stuff that's happened in the last week.
I can't even, honestly, at this point, I can't even. I don't even.
It's too much.
I don't want to look back.
It's too much to think back
this year,
on.
but
it's too much to think back on. And we're only we're not even 2 full weeks into this month yet, and this is just October.
And you went right for it, man. You just came out and said what we were talking about,
dude.
Today.
With everything that we've been going through, I gotta spoil it early. I want to get into it. You know, everyone knows who we are by this point. Talkin TV podcast. Subscribe. That's all I'm gonna leave them with for today.
We just broke 100 subscribers. Speaking of subscribers,
yeah, we did. So you still have to remind me what we're actually
going
to do about. You still have to remind me of what we're going to do about that after this episode is over.
Okay, we'll leave them in suspense. Even though I know we won't say it right now, so stay up to date with our Instagram if you want.
You got to remind me. I'm the one that forgets now, people. It's gotten really bad.
It used to be me.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to.
It used to be me, like a lot. Yeah. God, Tom. So how are you doing today?
Hey, man, we're being crass, we're being truthful, and we're just bringing the hate. Oh man, people, if you think this is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. We got in 2 weeks, we've got a little something new for you as far as just the specific podcast episodes go. But Chris, 5 weeks ago, we sat down and watched a TV show, a returning TV show from last year that we didn't think was going to be possible. With the return of season 2 of The Boys, with all this COVID stuff up in the air, we were a little bit skeptical as to what TV shows were coming back and what weren't. I'm surprised at how many they were still able to get out. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
it was a lot more than I thought it was going to be. We're also watching a new show right now that is a sequel to an anthology show that was very well received in 2018. More on that later. But today,
we should just say it because it's coming out in 2 days.
No. At the end of the episode, say it. Don't spoil it.
That's bad. That's bad form, man.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
All right. Haunting of Bly Manor.
Damn it. Come on.
Hey, look, you came out and said this is just the come out and say it episode.
Oh my God. Look, whatever. People, because Chris insists on spoiling everything and not airing anything up in suspense. We're talking about The Boys season 2. Oh man.
Yeah.
Where do I even begin? I've said that a lot recently, but seriously, where do I even begin? Just 5 episodes later. And I don't know, do you think that the week by week model actually benefited this show in this season? Because it went from the dropping all at once like Netflix. Amazon was kind of always like 50-50 with that. And then obviously with COVID, they're like, nope, week to week.
Yeah, so I think it helped. I have positives and negatives. Let me get into the positives first, then I'll give you my negatives for it, because I actually kind of have thought about this a bit. I don't like how Apple TV Plus and Amazon has more recently done the 3 at once, and then
not a fan of that.
I don't like that. I think it's like because I like to get in a rhythm with my TV, so I either want to watch it at my own pace, like Netflix style, right? They drop it all at once, and you go and you binge it whenever you can, or I want to know, like I'm sitting down, like with Lovecraft Country, every Sunday, and I'm watching this show, because I think that it kind of says a lot if you feel the need to bulk your first 3 episodes together and then release the rest afterwards. It's like, what are you saying about those first 3 episodes?
See, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that actually builds into kind of one of my big points about this season as a whole. But as far as that whole thing goes, I will say that, especially with how fast content needs to be streamlined now, I can understand certain streaming services wanted to batch a few of their episodes together in order to make it seem like it gives you people like a little more than what they're used to. As far as that, it's a flimsy defense, I'll admit, but just like maybe offering some rationale behind the mindset. I too agree with you. Give me it one at a time, or give me them all at once. Although here's the thing, will you accept a 2-parter episode? Because I know Lost was notorious for that.
I will, because I think that sometimes creative decisions call for a 2-parter, like season finales of yesteryear. We've seen a lot of those back in the day, so Lost is a great example. And now let me just say, like, I felt like I got into a rhythm, but there was always something left in the back of my, head thinking like, damn, I don't feel like I'm getting what I want out of the show, because we got those first 3 dynamic, explosive episodes. You can go catch our initial reactions on the season here on YouTube. We have our review of it, and you guys can get a taste of like, I was blown away. I clearly remember recording that episode. Yeah, and it was an amazing start. And even though I thought it was a pretty good season, like I enjoyed a lot of it, I just think the pacing and the way we were given it kind of like unfortunately impacts the reason why the excitement did fizzle out a little bit for me.
Damn it, Chris, you did it again. You read my mind. Seriously, stop doing that.
Oh God,
stop
okay.
doing that.
Damn,
Seriously,
all right.
you're telling me that I'm always the one that does that. And I'm like, Jesus Christ,
I'm
give
sorry,
a man
man.
a minute. Give a man one original thought, because yeah, I pretty much felt the exact same way. It's funny because my thoughts on this are so stringent, because I have my thoughts on the first 3 episodes, I have my thoughts on the season as a whole, and my thoughts on each individual episode leading up to the finale. It's so crazy how that works. That is just like the world that we live in now as far as TV goes, where we have so little content now just compared to what we had before, that we micromanage everything that we have in front of us. It's kind of funny. But yeah. So The Boys season 2, to say the least. Putting out our thoughts immediately, I think we can both agree, rest of the season after the first 3 episodes, not the best in comparison. Didn't hold up the steam, the fire that those first 3 episodes generated.
Yeah, it didn't. But that's like not to say that this wasn't a dynamite season.
Right.
Because I think if I had been able to watch it all at once or week by week, I think my opinion would be different, which is weird.
I think that as a whole, this season is, technically speaking, a better season than the first one.
Yes.
I think just like from a writing standpoint, as far as how tight the story goes, I think that this second season overall is better. But because it was gifted to us in these individual pieces, overall, weirdly enough, I think there are certain parts of the first season that I liked more. Namely, first of all, and I'm just going to come right out and say it, the ending. I like the season 1 finale way more than I like this season finale. And again, that's not to say that this finale was bad. Not at all. But if anything, Chris, I think we can both say that the show kind of let some of its chips go a little bit too early, wouldn't you say?
I would agree with that a lot, actually. I think that's a really
this is nutty
way to put that. No, because I wouldn't be able to. That's exactly how I feel, but I wouldn't have been able to say it as eloquently as you just did. Now,
thank you.
Let me ask you this then, Dom, just to make sure like we're really on the same page here.
Yeah, so far we've been beat for beat matching each other. I can't wait. The suspense until the end is going to kill me as to what our star rating is for the season overall, because I'm like, oh man.
I think my star rating is going to have a bit of. Well, it's just gonna. I'm not gonna give the rating, but I'm just gonna say that I think I'm gonna say a lot of good things about this, and I don't think my rating's gonna reflect poorly. But I think people are gonna expect more out of my rating. But
okay,
50 minutes later, you'll know. Anyways, right now we're not at that point yet. I almost think like there needs to be a new job in Hollywood where it's like people who, because you know how they have like people who read scripts at the agencies and they determine if it's a good script or a bad script. I think you need people who watch now and determine if this is something you throw out all at once, or if you give the first 3, then you hook them week to week afterwards. We need like that kind of quality control.
Because I have to say that this one, and I usually never say this about a show, this should have been released all at once. Absolutely. This is like one of the few things should have been released all at once, because weirdly enough, waiting week to week kind of just like made the experience a little bit more annoying, for lack of a better word. It sort of generated the same feelings that I had back when I was watching Walking Dead week to week, which that just became torturous after a while. Oh my God, how do people still watch that show? But I had a couple notes, because again, notes, that's my thing now. Look at all that
I love
stuff.
it. So
dude, I went in depth for it.
Good. Is it safe to say that if you are tuning in and you haven't watched this yet, well, this would be your time.
I think it's safe to say this would be the time to check out, because we're going to now spoil the shit out of the rest of season 2. So
come back later, but now check out. Dom, I know you get specific on those notes, so I just wanted to warn people. That's all.
All right,
let's get into
that's
it, man.
good. So let's get into it. Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. There's so much that I have written down. It's like I don't even know. First off, and again, this is the one thing that I will say the rest of the season actually did live up to, that I wasn't the biggest fan of in the first 3 episodes that you were. Frenchie and Mother's Milk. Finally, I'm like, okay, these two now have something to do, and they're now both really awesome and like really actually fleshed out characters. So I'll say if there was one thing among a few things that season 2 got right, it was definitely those two at first.
I agree. Yeah, their growth and their development, and especially Frenchie, who I mean, I feel like I got to
not expected at all.
Yeah, I feel like I got to know Mother's Milk a little bit in the first season. We understood he was a family man who got pulled back in because the cause meant so much to him that it was worth putting everything on the line. Super generic and super baseline, but at least we got that out of him. Whereas Frenchie was this sort of removed from the world guy who sort of like flirted with this criminal underworld. Was he a criminal himself? Was he not? We don't know. He was just sort of more like a generic character type rather than like a person with feelings and emotions. And Mother's Milk was hollow, but not as hollow in the first season. But goddamn, this season those guys could have spin-offs at this point, and
Yeah,
I would watch it honestly.
And the funniest part is that when I heard the spin-offs news, I went, 2 seasons and they're already doing that. That's never a good sign. But honestly, with how certain of directions that this show went, I might not necessarily be opposed to spin-offs, but we'll have to see how they spin it. Wordplay. My first major note, MVP of the season, besides those two who actually got development, Queen Maeve. Wasn't expecting her to shape up the way that she did. I was expecting that arc to kind of go nowhere, the same way that it went with last season, the same way that it kind of went with the Deep. A-Train still got like a little bit of redemption at the end, even though this season was a big step down for him as opposed to last season. But the Deep, it's official. That guy's just there to get fucked over. It's kind of sad that he's going kind of the Silicon Valley route, and I was hoping that they weren't going to do that, but they did. Still, weirdly enough, not one of my like most disappointing parts about the finale, but we'll get to that.
He's a bit of he seems to be like the gag to me. Like when the Deep's around, we're gonna get a bit, or we're gonna get some sort of joke or some
Pretty
Scientology backlash.
That's where the Roganisms really come in.
Yeah, and let me just say this, I do disagree a little bit about Queen Maeve. I think that I was super scared coming out of those first 3 episodes. I said, wow, this character is just filling a seat on the 7 right now, and that's literally her only purpose. Sure, it got a little more interesting, but it's a big ensemble cast, and I think she was, if there was someone that was mismanaged, I think she'd fall into that category. Because
I was just speaking in terms of the fact that like she actually gets stuff done, and when she needs to step up at the end, at least she does actually step up, and she's like kind of the only other active one that like seeks to like supplant Homelander, even if she is doing it for kind of selfish reasons. There was that whole aspect, and then when she like actually ended up being the one that saved the day with threatening Homelander at the end, that part kind of like really made up for the rest of the season. Because if you think about it too, her whole thing was, again, she was kind of supposed to be like the Wonder Woman-esque character where she's the moral center. And even though, again, when we're talking about the 7, that really doesn't count for much, at the very least it's something. And also her whole point in season 1 was that she was supposed to come around with Starlight, like kind of like actually showing to be idealistic and like representing all the ideas that she used to. And now that she's kind of come around on that, we're seeing like her actually have to struggle with that. And I'm glad that of all the characters, she actually made the right choice in the end. So that's kind of why I have her up there, but also mostly because they cucked. I'm going to use that word. They cucked my boy Black Noir. Oh my God. They did him so dirty.
That was hilarious, dude. I thought that was really funny. But I think the Roganisms, they come through in this script in a way where other Seth Rogen produced shows fail, in the sense that like I tried watching that show Future Man, and it was just too much joke first, script and compelling storyline second. Whereas in this situation, it's like, okay, that was actually hilarious. Spoiler alert, stuffing the almond joy in Black Noir's mouth. He's allergic to almonds.
Why I'm a little bit disappointed later on, but
it was a huge character moment for Queen Maeve. I still think that her storyline didn't compel me enough, whereas when she actually stepped up to the plate, it kind of, again, felt like, oh, well, we have this character and she had to do something, and it's convenient that she's doing this. I didn't feel fully moved by her actions, but if you guys remember our season premiere episode, I definitely am not as upset with her character development as I was during the first 3 episode dump.
It was a situation where this season contained a lot of doom and gloom, to say the least, as if season 1 wasn't already depressing enough. And it was just refreshing to see a character actually go through like a meaningful growth and change, especially since it seems like a lot of the characters are either ready to move on with their lives or just going in further bad directions by the end of this season. We're going to get into that. My next point, which I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of because of how predictable it kind of ended up being. Becca, I believe the term is getting fridged, I believe is the correct term. That was the term that they used for Vanessa in Deadpool 2. The idea of taking a female character and then killing her off or moving her off screen just for the purposes of continuing the plot and the trajectory of said male character. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is like the actual term that is used. And that's exactly what happened with Becca. Like she escapes. She manages to meet up with the boys in New York City. She tells Butcher that Homelander and Stormfront have Ryan and that she needs to get them back before they like start converting him and making him like crazy and evil like they are. And so that's what drives the boys' mission for this episode. And unfortunately, at the end, and now we're getting into really big spoiler territory here. So again, bear with us, people. If you have not seen this episode, please click out now. This is your last warning.
Come back.
Stormfront, after getting the ever-living shit kicked out of her in a moment that was memed before I even had a chance to watch it on the TV by Kimiko, Annie, aka Starlight, and Queen Maeve. She escapes, corners Butcher, Becca, and Ryan in the forest. She's choking out Becca. Butcher, who still, even though he's been fighting Soups for how long, still shoots a gun at her, still slams an iron crowbar against her back, knowing full well it's not going to do anything. And then Ryan, his little emotions were triggered. His laser eyes go off. He fucking literally, thank God for my coworkers at work because they came up with the best term. He Anakins Stormfront, literally.
Yeah, he does. He literally looked just like Anakin.
And somehow, this is the only part that kind of didn't make any logistical sense to me. He somehow only slashes his mom's throat. That was like all that happened. That was a little bit confused. But the point being is that Becca dies because of her son's involvement. And it's literally only there to further like Butcher's continuation as far as like, oh, don't hate Soups.
Yeah, her character, I felt like they could have done so much more with her because I actually really enjoyed her performance, and I kind of liked the clash between her and Homelander. And she did everything that character should be doing the right way, sort of realizing that her son is the only one who can go up against Homelander, and understanding that this Homelander guy is well, she knows firsthand who he is, of course. And so it was just like was a little upsetting when I guess if getting Fridge is the term, when she got Fridge, because I was like, I feel like it could have done a little more with that. Like,
there could have been a lot more for that character to do.
But she was a solid addition to the cast, and her performance was great, and she served her purpose. But
so weirdly enough, these are usually the parts that I hate about these types of media properties and shows. But her moments with Butcher in episode 4 were like the highlight of that episode. Well, that and Homelander and his weird thing going on with Doppelganger. But
yeah, that scene in the car in the end when they're
I love
on
that
the bridge,
scene.
and
That's
they had a good
scene.
chemistry. They had a good chemistry.
They had a really good scene. And I must really sound like a scumbag for saying this, especially after I made a case that Becca got Fridge. Just the crazy part is that as much of a scumbag Butcher was in those first 3 episodes, oh man, he ended up like kind of winning the season for me at the end. Weirdly enough, of all the characters, I think that what's it called? Just his, obviously, and again, I hate the fact that Becca had to get Fridge for this, but just the fact that we got to know a little bit more about him personally. I think that just his act of like willing to go along, and the fact that Becca was the one true person that he actually did care about, the fact that he would be willing to go out of his way to protect her son, who is a Soup, which he had already set up a deal earlier in that episode to have sold to another Vought facility and never see the light of day, basically, essentially, which would fulfill Vaught's like worst fear, in that he would become a Homelander too, which again, that's a pundit for later also. And he puts that aside. And yet the one confusing thing is that he gives him to Grace, which you have to assume, what is the FBI
I was just about to bring that up.
Home? That was a little weird.
I was just about to bring that up.
What?
Because I was like, okay, Dom, I'm with you on everything you're saying right now about Butcher sort of winning the season and whatnot, if that's how you want to look at it. But then I was going to say, I hope he comes up with the point that, like, the woman he loves, his wife, who he kind of got to spend some time with again, and they rekindled their fire and whatnot, what have you. And then he just dumps her kids off to like, I don't know, some FBI corporation. Like, what are you doing, unless he
meant to give him to Grace to raise. That's the only thing I can think of, though. That's literally the only thing.
They just didn't explain it. Like, is he putting him there for protection because he knows that?
I would have to assume it's for protection, and just the fact that like he knows that even to some degree he won't be able to be around this kid without thinking of the fact that like,
because even though this kid is a Soup, he still has an impressionable mind, and this kid the future of this kid is the future of the world, essentially. Pretty
much, yeah. Because I'm just gonna spoil it now. I don't care. The comic twist about Black Noir is that Black Noir is secretly a clone of Homelander, which they have already established they are not doing for the show. Because they established that not only does because it's Ryan now. Ryan is now Vaught's contingency plan against Homelander. Right. They even said it in the show. So it's like, unless I accidentally spoiled the biggest twist about Black Noir, if it turns out to be true in a later season, unfortunately, it looks like that's the direction that they're going with.
As long as Almond Joys exist, I don't think Black Noir is going to be bothering anyone anytime soon.
Literally, like the Kryptonite could go. Oh my God, I loved it.
Oh God. But no, that was a good point. I'm glad you said that about Ryan getting, shipped off to the FBI, because I was with Homelander. I mean, Butcher every step of the way. until that.
And
And I was like,
Homelander wasn't that much better, but if anything, this season was like all just about like just how pathetic and sad and lonely Homelander is, and that was kind of all there is to it. Because if you look at like everything that happens to him, it's like, dude, I've never once felt sorry for this guy, but he's looking a little bit Deep-esque pathetic right now.
dude, can I say, while we're on the subject of Homelander, I legitimately was in shock when, you remember the protest scene where he just imagines like ripping them all in half? If they actually would have done that.
That's what I'm saying, dude. That's what I'm saying, because I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I really thought that the show was going to go in the direction of, especially after the exploding head scene at the end of episode 7, I'm like, you know what? Okay, they have to go there at this point. Soup apocalypse. It's going to happen.
I would have loved that.
I was
Me
waiting.
too,
I'm like,
dude.
come on, Eric Kripke. You have your CW roots. You know the CW has done some bullshit like that. You can make it work. I'm telling you. And then they didn't. And I'm like, well, there goes potential for all future seasons. Now I understand why you're doing spinoffs, because you wrapped up your entire story in one episode rather than like providing a new interesting direction for it to go. Dude,
you don't think that's possible anymore at all?
We are so on the same wavelength. It's scary. Like, you're legitimately.
You said safe wavelength?
Yeah, same wavelength.
Yeah. So but you don't think it's possible because I thought, okay, they teased at it in like, what was that, episode 5?
I'm saying it was possible. I'm saying what I'm saying is that it was like the only possible option they could have done in order to make the next season like even more awesome, and they totally didn't. And I'm like,
but you don't think
why?
It's still possible?
No, not at this point. I don't think.
Yeah, I think they're just holding out hope.
Yeah, I think that right now, again, if anything, it's kind of weirdly enough almost back, and it's so funny because I remember the first episode you saying that like this was so much more daring than Marvel. I'm like, really? Because wrapping everything up in a nice little bow, maintaining the status quo was pretty typical for Stan Lee. So
yeah, but I couldn't have known that back then, you know?
You're right.
I couldn't have known they would have done that back then.
You're right, and I was a little bit blindsided by those first 3 episodes too, but after a while I was starting to think, I'm like, oh, especially after episode 5, that was when I was like, oh no.
Because here's the thing, like, okay, they tease that, they don't actually do it. They still have more, you know, leg room, runway to give us before we get to that point, right? They should have done it in the finale.
Yeah,
they should have ended.
They really should have.
That scene.
When the head exploding scene happened, I was like, okay, we're doing this. This was even more excessive than I'm used to, and I think we've said that enough. Like the gore porn, they got to ratchet. I'm telling you, it's starting to become like shock value for shock value's sake.
I feel like it's like Game of Thrones.
Ending of season 3, exactly.
I was just gonna say that.
Exactly.
Oh my god,
it kind of
happening
because
today?
Season 4 is literally my favorite season of that show. But
yeah, me too.
Nudge. But yeah, season 4 is great. You know, you want to know something funny? Because I have my Game of Thrones books right there. Like the whole thing about season 4 is literally like the last like 30 pages of the book or something like that. It's literally just Joffrey's wedding, Tyrion's trial, and the Battle of the Wall, and everything that comes after, and that's it. It's whole, and it's the best season, and it's the last great season. But back to the actual show, we're talking about The Boys, which clearly is not interested in longevity at all. It's just continued with maintaining the status quo. Bro, I'm telling you, The Boys within 2 seasons has already become your equivalent of Marvel. I'm telling you. And I hate to be that guy. I've been that guy all last week to you.
It wasn't up until like episode 5. But now they're like taking the safe route. Like, here's the one thing I don't understand. Okay, you are clearly deconstructionist. Why not go all the way?
Yeah.
Why not stick it? Like,
Watchmen went all the way, and Watchmen did it in 1 season.
Like how they call it poetic justice, right? That guy who worked at the CW who's on this show. How amazing would that have been for him to be like, you know what? We're gonna do what we tried to do with all those terrible crossovers between Arrow and Flash and Supergirl.
Oh, he wasn't involved in that. He did Supernatural.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
It's Eric Kripke who did Supernatural.
Some cringy CW roots he has. We're gonna just go all the way and like make actual art out of this. You know what is a solid playbook, but CW does not execute it. But dude, okay, so let me ask you this:
Netflix and Amazon keep imitating them for whatever reason. I think it's because they probably keep hiring the same people.
Yeah, and I want your take on this, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
All right.
I was so on board during that penultimate episode, and then the finale just really let all the air out for me.
Weird 50-50 case, because my whole thing was that episode 7, the penultimate, was so disappointing compared to how awesome episode 6 was. Like, episode 7 really felt like the episode where it's like, okay, now we need to get back to the plot, and we just need to speed through it and give the most half-assed ending. And I'm like when I saw all those heads exploding, I'm like, okay, so we're still not going to get an answer. And what we thought was an answer was actually not an answer. And so I guess the whole thing was that the final episode was just awesome enough that it was like slightly overcame my disappointment from episode 7, if that makes any sense. It was kind of like a cliff and then a little uptick and then down, but it wasn't that much better. Like 6 to me was the last high point. 6 to me was like actually a legitimately good episode.
All right, I'll give you that. Yeah, I'm not saying I hated the finale. I just felt like, well, like we just said, the direction that I wanted them to go, they didn't go.
Right.
And so it's a little hard to...
The one thing that I'll say is, again, you've talked about this ad nauseum. We have to respect that, like, there's a certain direction that the artists choose to go with, and that our view is going to be different from them. It's just the case, we always have to respect that when we give and do. But still, when it, to me, affects the natural story order, and you and I are going to talk about this next week on the finale of your Lovecraft Country recap. Oh, man. Let me tell you something. I have not been on a single episode since that first episode. But man, oh man, am I looking forward to that.
That's become just a chore. But anyways, because I felt like if there was a show to do the unsaid, to give us the unsaid reality that we all want, it would have been The Boys. And when they didn't do it, when the soup apocalypse didn't happen, I was just like, well, it's never gonna happen now.
Hashtag make the soup apocalypse happen.
Dude.
Fuck
release
the
soup
cut.
Apocalypse.
Yeah, release the soup. Yeah, fuck the Snyder cut. Release the soup apocalypse. That's what we should do.
But I digress, man. You take a little bit right now.
So my next question for you was, after that finale, I don't think we really need to talk about Stormfront too much, because not only was I 100% right about everything, like the show didn't even try to keep that a secret.
No.
Like they really didn't even try. Like after that third episode 4, they basically told us, yeah, she's Liberty. And then episode 6, she's like, yeah, I'm a Nazi. I'm like, great. I was 100% right, and I hate myself even more for it. My question for you is she dead? Because a few things were... That's what I thought. I'm like, because she was still moaning like and mumbling in German at the end.
They actually said that she was...
Right, and they said that she was taken to an alternate facility. So I'm like, okay, that means she's still alive. Because I thought somebody online said she's dead. I'm like, no, she wasn't. She's still alive. They're keeping her around.
This is the kind of show that unless they show them die, they're not dead.
Yeah, this is that.
Like that Kimiko fake out.
It's right. It's not like Game of Thrones. Yeah, and we had another one this season too. We got another one this past episode. We got another Kimiko fake out. Except you know what Stormfront's mistake was? She didn't break off her hands, because those would have taken slightly longer to heal.
True.
So, but yeah, the one thing I will say, and it sucks because literally, no joke, I don't think I can watch her in anything ever again without seeing her as this character. Because literally in episode 6, when she dropped the American accent and brought on the German, I'm like, oh fuck, you're like scarily good at this. Like there's some history of this in your ancestry, like type good in this. I'm like, I sincerely hope that you're Jewish, because oh my god, like how bad of a look would that be?
Yeah, I mean, she really was a very convincing performer in this season.
Scary.
I gotta say, I think that for the one season character that she was, because I think it's going to be, the next time we see her is going to be a bit of like to harken back to your Anakin Skywalker reference. It's going to be a bit of a Darth Vader, a sort of
oh my god, dude, stop. I was literally just saying, I'm like, imagine they have her in like armor and like robot limbs in the next one. She has like a breathing helmet apparatus. I'd just be like, okay, just like,
I wouldn't put it past them. I think that would be awesome. But but I mean, I think like for
take notes, Eric Kripke.
Because I don't think she's done with the show, but I think the character of her was, I mean, hey, for a one season, antagonist, she was awesome.
Yeah.
She really was. Her dynamic with Homelander, their relationship, sort of exploring all of that was...
actually like their relationship, as
me too,
messed up and crazy as it was. You know why? Because she satisfied him in a way that Stillwell never really could. And it kind of helped that even though he's weirdly enough still too immature to like kind of grasp what it is that she's putting down, she still sees him as like the perfect like heir apparent to like what her and Frederick Vaught initially conceived. Like that's the whole thing, is that even though she just technically reports to Giancarlo Esposito, Stan Edgar, she really is like the mastermind pulling the bricks. Like she's the oldest one there. She was literally there at the beginning when superheroes were first invented. And the idea that this show actually roots the idea in the fact that superheroes were created by Nazis is a bold one, to say the least. I will give it that.
That was very bold. Yeah, I mean, so Giancarlo Esposito's character, I felt like he was a little underutilized.
I hate to say it, but it wasn't anything that I wasn't expecting at this point. You get Giancarlo, he's the guy, he's going to be Gus Fring. That's what people like. I'm watching Better Call Saul for the first time. And the most distracting thing about that is that even though it's a prequel, everyone looks significantly older. So that's really distracting. But other than
Yeah.
that, it's still great. But Giancarlo is still Gus Fring. He will always be Gus Fring and everything now, which is kind of sad because I remember back in the 90s when he was in all the early Spike Lee movies and like you didn't even recognize him. Like I've told you, he's bugging out from Do the Right Thing, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
that is crazy to me.
Yeah. 31-year difference
That
right
is
there.
just crazy to me.
That's
talk about
insane.
a transformation.
That's insane.
Yeah, I don't know. So I feel like he was a little underutilized and like sure you needed that role, but to get a name like that in that role, I just thought it was going to be a little less of the generic route that we've seen before, which is what I think we got, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So.
unfortunately. And yeah, so that actually brings me to my next note, which we kind of already talked about. As good as the finale is, it is still too much of a bow tie happy ending. Again, I don't want to dogpile on it too much because there are a lot of good things that I have to say about this season overall. But with the way that episode ended, it's like Frenchie and Kimiko were going off. You assume that they've made up. Mother's Milk is reunited with his family. Butcher starts a new league. Homelander is literally jerking off to the city because they've kind of like rendered him. It's just like, okay, so these guys are just all jokes. That's your way of like getting around them. No resolution or anything. They're just all pathetic. The only one who slightly gets a redemption is A-Train, and not even because he proves to be like give one little crucial piece of the puzzle that they kind of didn't need. I mean, they just did, and he just kind of like made it easy for them. Like, how interesting would it have been if like their final mission was to like they had to split up between protecting Becca and breaking into the church in order to get those notes, and like maybe have a square up between the Deep and A-Train. I'm already pitching like a more exciting finale than what we got, and it sounds really unfortunate, but because I really didn't want to be that guy.
And you know, when they asked A-Train, they're like, "How did you get here?" He's like, "Dude, I can traverse the boroughs in 3 hours." I was like, "Wow!" So I thought they weren't even going to try to explain that. I thought he was just going to show up. They were going to get scared.
And they didn't mention the heart problems. And they didn't mention the heart problems once.
Yeah, no, I mean they definitely got sloppy, I think, towards the end.
Yeah.
Which I don't.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They had as much time as they needed.
Yeah.
This was Amazon's like this is Amazon's show.
Golden prize jewel right now, whatever the terminology and metaphor you want to use is. This is their flagship show. And the fact that they are kind of dropping the ball this early shows that they seem to be following Netflix in a very negative way that, for me personally, does not bode well for the future of TV. Because, I mean, unless people's attention spans are dangerously shorter than I thought, I'm like, if you're going to end at least 3 and make sure that you plan for 3, because to me, the thing that still kills me is Netflix acts and glow when they clearly had a 4th season planned and that was already underway. That was already going to end the show. It's like, at the very least, let it end. Let it end.
Like,
and the fact that they're I don't want to go into a glow side tangent here because I'll be going off for the rest of this podcast about it. But
no, I hear you. I just think
I think Amazon would be I would be very short-sighted in order to think this way. Now, keep in mind, we still have to see the way that the rest of the streaming services do it because we're still only getting a 2nd season of Mandalorian. We're only getting a 2nd season of Morning Show, if that. Certain other shows are still going on. Like, I think Handmaid's Tale is getting another season, I think. So it's still too soon to tell as far as a bunch of new shows are concerned. But as far as, like, Amazon, I'm pretty sure now is, like, almost on the level of Hulu. That's, like, right below Netflix as far as the streaming services go.
I think so because, you know, unfortunately shows like The Tick and Hunter sort of gathered a little notoriety,
but just not enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
but now
looking
the
for
boys
like
really put them on the map. And so that's why, like, I don't know why it didn't have to feel rushed. I mean, the love for the first season only keeps growing. Yeah. Now let me ask you this though.
But apparently, in the case of, well, real quick, just as far as Game of Thrones go, if there's one thing that shows that loving fan base doesn't mean shit when it comes to wrapping up the show properly anymore.
That's true. That's a fact. But let me just say this real quick, all right? Because I'm wondering if we are just being super analytical because it's what we do.
I mean, it's kind of what we do at this point.
But do you think that not only normal people but other people in the film community are sort of overlooking sort of the critiques we have of the show? I know we're going to get to some positives. I just think that because we had such high expectations for the show, I think this is kind of why we got into the little bit of the negatives first. So now I got to ask you, like, do you think we're just being a little too over analytical, or do you think people need to drop the hammer on a show of this caliber like this?
Well, yes, because we're overly analytical of everything, and that's our nature. We're never going to be truly satisfied by anything. But the one thing I will say is that, especially now because of COVID, people are going to take what they get. And this is, like, as of right now, the most awesome thing they can take. So if anything, it just makes our job more difficult because it's going to make more regular people even less inclined to, like, even want to critique something. They don't want to critique shit in general as it is. Most of them just want to, like, post about it and seem cool. There's still, like, very, very few of us, despite the more and more that we meet. So we always have to keep that in mind. You know, I never want to get into that mindset because I've been in that mindset before, and it's a dangerous mindset that we are the majority. We're not at all. We are always going to be the minority, and we just kind of have to come to terms with that. And if anything, it's just going to make our job more important because literally, no joke, we're fighting to stay alive at this point as far as critics go. We really are. So it's
a good answer.
Thanks. It has to be said. It really does. There's a reason why all of us are like our own independents now.
Yeah.
But
damn.
So actually, oh man, I had one more negative before I got into the positives.
Let's do it. I think that's perfect, and we'll get into the positives.
Oh, well, see, the only thing that I wanted to just say is actually, you know what? I'll save it for the positives because this shit is too great. The Congresswoman reveal, that hacked on twist ending at the end, where you was rolling your eyes as hard as I was in that scene.
I didn't like
Probably
it at all.
harder.
I thought that they took away. If we weren't getting the soup apocalypse, I at least thought a strong, compelling, compassionate human who is not a soup, who's in a position of power like that, was another saving grace direction. Not as cool as the soup apocalypse, but I thought it would have been really cool.
Something to see someone refreshing outside of the main group be like, okay. And then, oh my God, it feels so much just for the sake of a twist for having a twist. It's one of those bullshit Walking Dead cliffhanger fucking things where it's like, hey, we know that we just wrapped everything up, but you guys will still be here for next season, right? Because of this. And you want to know what the worst part about that is? Besides how she connected to the church, which the church and Vought already kind of made sense. So why they need to throw her into the mix, I have no idea. And as far as making a big show about the exploding heads, okay, so was she in on Vought the whole time? Or was she like her own entity? And the problem is that you want to talk about certain things getting too political. The next season, if they go where I think they're going, they're literally going to be like, okay, now we're going to talk about corporate entities' involvement in big government, specifically like liberal government, which I'm like, okay, because we need that on this show now in this time. And the fact that Huey's going to work for her, dude, I already know what the plot lines are going to be next season. And the fact that I can already predict them before the next season has even come out worries me a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think it's, I think if you're well read, and I think if you understand more than just a small bubble in your life, you can kind of gauge where it's going, and that sucks because that's like not what I want out of this show. Because coming into this season, I had no idea where we were gonna go.
Yeah. Which, oh my God, dude, stop. That's literally the big thing that I said is that I'm like, okay, at the end of the season 1 finale, I was surprised and I couldn't wait to see what was next. At the end of this finale, I'm like, I could care less about seeing anything else in this universe. And not because it was bad, because that just what the story was telling me, that this was over.
Yeah. And dude, I think this might have been my most anticipated show of the year. That or Barry season 3, but we didn't get that.
I knew that Barry and Succession got pushed back, so I think it was between this and Mandalorian as far as my most anticipated for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
either
so for me, this was probably it if it wasn't Barry.
Yeah, and I was
season 4, of course.
Yeah, and I was looking forward to Westworld season 3 before we actually saw it.
I wasn't, but
no, Clone Wars season 7. That was my most anticipated for this year.
Yeah, Clone Wars was good too. But this was for me probably my most anticipated show, if I'm being honest. But once I learned Barry got pushed back. So, yeah, exactly. But I mean, damn man, that was a terrible twist. I thought it was super corny. I thought you took a character who was actually interesting because it was kind of different. You took a saving grace and you took it away from us, and you just dropped us into the formula. You drag and dropped us into the freaking formula.
I'm like done. I'm like, I already know where the next season is going to go. See, but that's what I mean. The formulas, dude. They're coming back with a vengeance. They are. We can never escape them as much as we think we can try. Now, with all that being said, we have about 20 minutes left on this podcast, but I do have a few good things actually left to say. First of all, love sausage. Yeah, that happened. I saw the scene in the episode. It's part of the reason why it's my favorite episode. Well, that and what they ended up doing with Lamplighter, which actually surprised the hell out of me because not only was it Frenchie's best moment as a character, but it also, besides being another blatant middle finger to Marvel, which I'll get to in a little bit, that whole character arc was great. But they're trapped in that room, and you just see this giant snake-looking thing break through the glass and wrap its neck around Mother's Milk. Frenchie tries to get it off, and they look outside, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's why they call him Love Sausage." I'm like, was that what I think it is? I'm like, okay.
God, yeah, that was hilarious.
Okay. It was funny. It was really funny because I was just like, okay.
A positive I will say is sort of to this tune is, they do this thing where, this does feel very original and organic. At the same time, organic to Seth Rogen. in his sensibilities and the things I grew up loving, but it's like for the first time, and I think this just comes with experience. You know, he's been a showrunner for a few times now. I haven't heard about Preacher. I heard it was really good, but I've also sort of heard that for every hit he has, there's like 4 or 5 duds.
Yeah.
And so I think he's finally learning like when to not be himself and when to put some of himself in the show. And the jokes and the gags in this season, like, you know, Patton Oswalt with the Deep and sort of like the sausage thing, those felt very Seth Rogen to me, but they didn't make me think, oh, here's another joke. It just was organic. It worked. It worked really
weirdly
well.
enough, the Seth Rogen bits were actually some of my favorite parts of the season. Like I said this on a premiere. I love the Gills moment and love sausage moment. I'm just like, there is a show that has a man whose superpower is that he can grow and extend his penis like Mr. Fantastic. That is a thing on an American superhero television show.
Because as you know, Seth Rogen's humor is very hit or miss, but I at least thought it was tastefully dropped into this kind of intense show.
Yeah.
So
now
kudos to the show running.
Yeah. Again though, and I think we ended up hating the show more than we realized because I only have like one more good thing to say about it.
Is that just who we are? I mean, I don't
know. I really don't. We've only been doing this a year, and we've only been doing this a year, and we still don't realize that. Oh yeah, people, we've been on doing our podcast has been around for a year, not our 1 year on YouTube. That's not for a while, but
this is like the 1 year audio anniversary episode.
Yeah,
right?
the 1 year audio anniversary. Yeah, I don't remember
Congrats,
what episode this is specifically, but I loved. And again, this is part of the more cynical part of me. It's kind of the only reason why I think I was able to enjoy something like Kick-Ass 2, which was, we all know, not nearly as intelligent as Kick-Ass 1. It's the difference between the director of X-Men First Class and the director of Fantasy Island. True story. Of
course,
the show doubled down on it. Went from like sort of like a subtle satire the way that it was in the first season, just being a straight up mockery. Like every chance this show could get to maim, harm, bitch slap, anything having to do with insulting Marvel, it took it. From Homelander literally making fun of a blind person in the first episode and then clapping his eardrums, effectively making him useless, I'm like, okay, so that was a Daredevil F you. But the best one in my opinion, Lamplighter, dude. What a dichotomy of a character where I went from actually feeling a lot of sympathy for this guy, even though he's a scumbag, to hating him even more in one episode. But the hating him mostly came from bad writing, not the actual character itself, but how they took a shot at Marvel's Chris. Do you know who that actor is who played Lamplighter?
I don't know who the actor is, but I thought it was a Human Torch.
No, not quite. Not even better. Not Human Torch. Really? That was Chris Evans, aka Captain America. That is Shawn Ashmore, who portrayed Iceman in X2 and X3, X-Men 3, The Last Stand, and X-Men Days of Future Past. And they brought him on literally playing the opposite. He was playing the pyro guy because, you know, his buddy Pyro in X-Men could do the thing where he could like create fire, but only if he had a lamp. And they literally just blatantly took that character and stuck him in here as like the outcast of the Seven. And I'm like, you know, because while he's part of the Seven, he like probably took up like the Firestorm-esque ripoff part. And I'm like, wow, so we just jumped right from DC to Marvel. We're not even like trying to be subtle about it anymore. And like the whole thing this is actually weird because it actually gets into like an unintentionally kind of smart thing the show stumbled into, which I actually think is kind of ingenious. And this is where the Disney poking comes in. So bear with me for a second here. In episode 5, which had a strong argument, at least until episode 7, to be my least favorite episode. It was the episode where it was them at Butcher's house with Black Noir, and then just fucking them on the movie set the whole time, and with A-Train trying to like not fire himself. But when they're filming this, and you know they do the whole girls get it done thing with Stormfront, Queen Maeve, and Annie, Starlight. Oh my god, I thought she was Liberty something. I'm like, no, that was Stormfront and Starlight. That again, it was typical corporate marketing. None of it is anything meaningful. It's all just like meant as a commercial. It's a blatant FU to Joss Whedon with the reshoots for Justice League, you know, with the Joss punch-up line and everything. But weirdly enough, and I can't believe I'm giving this credit, the show actually had Queen Maeve say, "I'm gay" on screen, which, to my knowledge, still hasn't been done by anything Disney. I know, I'm stretching it a lot, but I have to give credit where credit is due as far as an Amazon TV show that was already kind of on its way out, that was doing a very good job at being a blatant satire / mockery of these types of tropes that we see on the corporate side and just in general. And that was the one moment where I'm like, okay, The satire might have beat the original to the punch. Kudos if that is the case.
So
Do you
you're
agree with me, or
saying,
do you
like,
think it's a little bit forced? It's still forced and just
are you
manufactured.
well? Are you saying you give kudos to like them, like giving a voice to that, like a empowering voice to that, or what's
Yeah,
your?
an empowering voice, not to like an empowering voice to the fact that that community is still marginalized, even though we are the main masses have kind of been tricked into the fact that we think they're not. When Disney gives like a 5-second scene that all of Twitter makes a big deal about for no reason.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I think that they. So here's how I'll respond to that. I
Yeah,
think that
'cause
this
that was a
show.
lot.
Yeah, I think that this show isn't afraid, and this is something I will give them a huge positive for. They're not afraid to tackle the issues in a very real way. You know, they don't sugarcoat anything. They kind of remind me a little bit of Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai.
Yeah,
You know, like, it's messy. The real world is dirty. It's not this clean, pristine Disneyland place. You know, like, there's garbage on the ground. You know, there isn't trash cans everywhere to put your garbage, and there isn't someone to always take it out for you. Sometimes you gotta take the trash out for yourself or confront the mess for yourself. And so I think that's kind of what they did with sort of like tackling the Queen Maeve story. You know, they weren't apologetic about how they did it, and they showed that, like, look, I mean, people, even superheroes, will struggle with this because the world's not up for it. So I thought it was like, it was real. You know, it felt like a very real way to tackle this. And so, like, that's the thing about this show is, no matter how far fetched it gets, no matter how many heads explode or how much of the gore they throw in our faces, I can't really hate on it too much because it is one of the better shows for me that's out right now because of
yeah.
how real they are with approaching
Yeah.
these kind of, like, you know, topical issues.
And again, the one thing that I'll say is that for as disappointing as the other episodes were in relation to how awesome the first 3 episodes were, this still wasn't a bad season. And just as far as its commentary, I still think it was a better season than season 1. I think I still had more fun with season 1 because just of like the wow factor, you know, like it being so new and so fresh, especially like it only came out like what, 2 months, 3 months after Endgame, something like that. So just to see it that quick, and in the same year that we got Watchmen too, like it seemed to be, and then even though it wasn't as popular at the time, Umbrella Academy, it just seemed to be kicking off this wave of like deconstructionist superhero stuff, and it seemed like it was so powerful that like even Disney was going to be forced to follow suit, like with WandaVision looking so different than anything that they've done before. So as far as that sense goes, I'm still very impressed with this season. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, because I think shock value is a big factor as to, like, we hadn't really seen something to this level of deconstructionist in the superhero genre before. Like you said, things have been popping up, but like the satirical approach we hadn't really seen, and kind of like how you know, stand-up comedy, like, there's almost like a stand-up comedian in the writing of this show in regards to, it's going to poke fun at everything because guess what? Both sides are dirty and messy, like I said. And so I kind of like respect them for not really pulling any punches because, hey, you're going to get offended if you watch this show. That's going to happen.
Yep.
Because the characters in this show are actual real people.
Yeah.
So,
and I like that, unlike season 1, where it felt like they could only focus on specific characters, I liked how this season did actually give a what's called a fair amount of screen time to everyone. And I felt like everyone got just the right amount of development. Even some of the side characters, I felt like got a lot more to do. And yeah, it was still a really, really good season. Now, my last question for you, Chris, because we're almost out of time here.
mm-hmm.
What do you think the finale does spell out for season 3 and any future seasons?
So, yeah,
I have a thought in my head, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, so like you just said, you know, for all of the negatives, and I think there's a reason why we kind of chose the negatives, at least for me, it's telling of the fact that, well, first off, look at what our negatives were. A lot of them were just subjectivity because this is a really sound, solid show.
Yeah.
And I think a show that pushes as many different buttons, like you kind of, you know, in the last few minutes here, brought us into the social commentary of it all, which I think they did ramp up from season 1. I think it's doing what they wanted to achieve, whether you like it or not. So going into season 3, I think now that we kind of know that this show, I think, struck a little more maturity in the way that they comedically broke down some of these real world issues. Like, it's very strange. It's like, hey, we got a little more mature in what we addressed, but how we addressed it all got way more ridiculous.
Yeah.
AKA head popping and exploding.
Yeah. Just exploding randomly.
I think expect more of that, but I also think expect a little bit of a downturn because, like we said, the very interesting and very original direction they could have taken, they didn't, and that does worry me, especially with that twist, which I think was just
that
a
was
final nail in the coffin.
So tacked on. That twist was the definition of tacked on, and I'm like, ugh.
But yeah, that's what I think, man. Is that what you wanted from me?
Kind of. I mean, I was mostly just talking about like specific ideas because, like I said, I was already starting to pitch season 3 in my head, and I'm like, oh boy, so ready for this?
Okay.
They're going to find out that the Congresswoman is evil, and they're going to find out that Vought was in league with the government the whole time. So now they can't trust the government. So now Butcher's determined to get Ryan away from Grace because he doesn't think he can trust her, and he has to bring back the boys and tear them out of their regular lives. And Starlight's come to help too. And Homelander, still not sure where they're going to go with him, but he's consistently been my favorite parts of these 2 seasons. So we'll see if he continues to be so. Queen Maeve, who cares after this past season?
She's kind of done, I feel.
And Huey, this is where my heart is going to break because poor Huey. Oh man, can this kid get a break just as far as character development goes? It felt like they were finally doing something, Chris. It felt like they were finally actually giving him something to do with the PTSD angle, the fighting with Butcher, the getting covered in blood every 3 seconds. And then that all just went away. And at the end, he's like, oh, hey, I'm going to get a job for the Congresswoman. And we as the audience members are supposed to gasp and be like, oh no, Huey, don't work for the person who just turned out to be evil. And I'm like, ugh, great.
Right. He has the girlfriend. He got his happy ending. Sure, his life's still messy and he lives with those demons in his closet, but things are looking up for Huey. And that's kind of not what I want because that's like a big compelling part of the first 2 seasons. It was like watching Huey get his redemption.
Yeah, pretty much. And then my last note that I wrote down is it felt like one of those finales that could have been a series finale on the off chance they get canceled. I'm like, is every show just going to do that now? Because they're so scared of the Netflix model getting axed earlier. They're just going to be like, okay, now we have to like write a certain series finale, like just to have in place on the off chance we get canceled. That way we can say everything got resolved.
So I know Netflix has kind of warmed up to the idea with being a little bit more open to their sort of corporate tactics, their corporate aggression,
especially now because they know that nobody's going to care or do anything about it.
Point in case, like, they were just like, hey,
like
glow's done.
Content people, like,
but
even
I hope
more so.
I mean, I didn't even think about the fact that other competitors might adapt that mentality. That would be terrible. Why would you watch anything on streaming?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, if I'm like, I'm not going to try anything, knowing that any new show that I get into will most likely be canceled after 2 seasons gives me less motivation to want to watch, not more.
Like, we get it, you know, shows don't run for 10 seasons anymore,
right? But that's fine. If anything, that's good. It needed to happen. Like, give me a good 4-season run. Boom, I'm good.
Yeah, Mr. Robot, right?
Yeah,
but it's just
perfect
like
4-season run.
It's like I don't want to. We love this stuff, so I don't want to like get invested in something and then have the corporate suits not like. This is stupid, man. If that's the case, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, we had to. Problem. We had to because this is the new problem that we've. It's literally no joke. It's the cancel problem of the 90s and 2000s, but for a whole new age, and it's so much worse.
It's just stupid. It's another podcast. I think that really just blew my mood.
That's a podcast for another day. I'm sorry. Listen,
I don't think so. I don't think this was I'm sorry. I just don't think this was a hey, in case we get canceled finale. I just think this was
but it's still. I guess that was like the illusion that I got from it. It's like, okay, this was almost written as like a last minute case back before. I'm like, this episode was definitely written before they knew that they were going to be a sure thing or not, because they knew at the very least they could pump out 2 seasons, and then
this show's doing great right now.
Yeah, especially now because of COVID, because it's like the only thing to watch. But this show blew up.
Yeah,
and then Eric was like, "Shoo, okay, safe," and all the risk went out of his head.
You never know. We'll wait for the 80-page book to come out about it.
I'm hoping I'm wrong, but again, to quote Jeff Goldblum, boy, do I hate being right all the time. That's all I got to say there. So, people, once again, thank you for tuning into another Talkin TV podcast. We've been having a lot of fun on this channel of ours. We've got, of course, as always, more content to give you guys. If you've been keeping up with our content, you know that this past weekend we were on David of Flicks Talks channel, kicking off our official Shocktober event with Candyman. We've got a lot more stuff planned. We've got watch-alongs every Friday of the month of October, except for the last weekend, which will be on a Saturday. You can find all the information in the bio below. Chris, do you have anything you want to let the people know of?
Well, I want to say thank you so much for 100 subscribers on YouTube. That is awesome. And here's to the next 100, if not thousands. I mean, that's the goal. We love doing this. We love being here for you guys, so much so that, we weren't going to be originally doing content on the channel on Fridays because we have all these watch-alongs scheduled for Shocktober, which totally go and check our Instagram. All the information about the watch-alongs is there. We're watching Saw this next Friday night on Guy at the Movie channel.
Guy at the movies, plural.
Sorry, yeah, Guy at the Movies YouTube
Wouldn't want
channel.
them typing in the wrong Instagram or YouTube.
And yeah, that is very true. Thank you, Dom. And that's going to be starting at 9 p.m. promptly Eastern Standard Time. But we have, we couldn't just not put something out on our channel for Fridays. So this Friday, we're going to be talking about Haunting of Bly Manor.
It's going to be a fun time. I just watched the first episode, and that should, oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man, why have I not gotten into Mike Flanagan sooner?
I know.
Dude, did you see the article that said Haunting of Hill House / Bly Manor is everything that American Horror Story wants to be? I'm like, ooh, the shade. So true though.
Yeah, American Horror Story is
fell off hard.
It's not that good. I tried.
Fell off.
Yeah,
hard.
It did. But yeah, so expect a lot of content. We post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Our number one focus right now is just putting out content that we love here for you guys on YouTube, and you seem to really be digging it. So thank you again for 100 subscribers. Hit that like button, turn on the bell for notifications, and of course, if you already haven't, subscribe. I mean, you're here, right? Hang out with us every week.
Oh man, and Chris, I just realized. So we were talking about The Boys today, and I just realized we forgot to give star ratings.
Oh,
we forgot a crucial
real
piece. 3.5 out of 5 for me. I already gave my final thoughts. It was still a good season, even if its future potential kind of is a little bit screwy right now, but the overall season, it was still a good season. So 3.5 out of 5.
Ditto.
Yeah, it's still making top 10 of the year. That's the one thing I will say. It is still making top 10 of the year, but it looks like it's going to be at the same spot or lower as the last season was on my last year's top 10.
Yeah.
So that's all I got to say about that. No, definitely not. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram, people. Again, we got a lot of content planned for you guys at Talkin TV or Talkin TV podcast. No G. And as always, people, you know what to do. Watch more fucking movies.